Lesson 3. Human Relations. Forms of Politeness, Part 1.
Per comunicare in inglese tecnico con stranieri occorre, come ormai sapete, usare le parole giuste per evitare al massimo le incomprensioni. È bene però sapere applicare alcune regole, l'etichetta, la gestualità, i modi di dire studiati sui banchi dei corsi di lingua inglese, in modo da poter esprimere, oltre alle parole, il colore dei sentimenti, tono formale o informale, scusa, rabbia, cortesia. Cerchiamo di avere, per il nostro arco, le frecce delle parole, ma anche del tono di voce con cui pronunciarle. In questa unità e nella seguente vi indichiamo alcuni ambiti in cui far pratica, dalla A alla Z, accompagnati ancora una volta dalla simpatia di Aldo Zoli.
Hello. Here we are, lesson 3. We're talking about polite English. And the way we've organized this particular lesson is that we've put together a series of handouts that you will be able to look at your leisure. Each handout is on a specific subject. So it's about table manners, it's about introducing yourself, it's about saying hello, and so on and so forth. A couple of things as a general introduction. First of all, English is a very polite language, maybe even more so than Italian or some of the Mediterranean languages. Why? Because I think in English it is an absolute must to always say please and thank you. And sometimes I'm afraid we tend to forget. The second thing is very often you would use the conditional form, which means that you would say would you, could you, may I. It is always conditional. And that's not only polite, but it's a very nice way of expressing yourself. Here are some guidelines for you. First of all is listen. You have to listen to your client to be able to adapt to their language and also to be able to understand better how they behave, who they are. The second thing is I would definitely avoid any type of negative words or negative statements. I would encourage you not to ever say straightforward no, as we may say in some of our countries or maybe in some northern countries. The Dutch are very famous for saying no all the time. It's actually the way they start a meeting, which is a bit destabilizing. Here are some examples for you. Thank you, but I would rather do it this way if it's okay with you. Thank you for inviting me, but unfortunately I have a previous engagement and I'm not able to make it tonight. I apologize for the misunderstanding, but maybe we could look at it in a different way. Or maybe let's try to rephrase it, see if we come to a mutual understanding. Please forgive me. The reason I could not make our 2 p.m. meeting is because I was stuck in a workshop and I couldn't get out of it. So here you are, lots of please and thank you and conditional forms. The other thing is about always using the word, the magic word, sorry. I am sorry because something. So, some examples for you. I'm sorry I was late for the meeting, but the traffic was horrendous. I am sorry you feel that way because we actually put all the efforts we could to understand your requirements. We are sorry that we could not send you the drawings last night, but unfortunately our plotter broke down. Nevertheless, we have sent them to the printers this morning and they will be delivered to your offices as soon as possible, the famous ASAP. The other thing is about softening your statements. Don't be too brutal. For example, I believe it would be better if, or let me describe to you the key features of our projects. Another one, it would be probably better, it might be better if we look at this particular issue with a different angle. Could you please come back to us with a different option? Or could you please come back to us with another proposal? Or even better, may I suggest we take the time to look at the different options? The other thing I wanted to say as a general speech is that we should try to avoid somehow pointing fingers. I know, particularly in Italy, we love doing this, and sometimes it's very useful because you want to indicate something or you want to be precise about something. But I think it's about not invading the other person's space and not using too much of what we call gestualità. On the other hand, I would like to encourage you not to be anything else than Italian, because we are very much appreciated in the world, and sometimes people also like the fact that we use our hands and they don't. Enjoy.
Polite English Part 1. To communicate in technical English with foreigners, you need to use the right words in order to avoid misunderstandings at the most. You also need to apply the rules, etiquette, gestures, and idioms studied in English courses so that you can express, in addition to words, the intensity of the feelings. Formal or informal tone, apologies, anger, politeness. We want to have our words at the ready, but also the tone of voice with which to pronounce them. Here are some areas in which you can practice from A to Z.
Polite English, tips from A to Z, which obviously means from Aldo to Zoli. Never mind. Apologizing, it's quite important in Anglo-Saxon cultures and obviously in English. The thing is, you should really apologize in length. You should obviously always use the word sorry, and you should add to your sorry a specific reason. For example, you're late for a meeting. I am sorry I'm late. There was a lot of traffic. I am sorry I'm late. I had a slight problem with my children this morning. Whatever it is, but try to make it real after the word sorry, and always say sorry. And maybe a little tip for us Italian, don't say excuse me, because that's something completely different. When you say excuse me, is because you're actually asking a question. If you say I'm sorry, it's because you're apologizing. So, excuse me, could you tell me the direction to go wherever? But, oh, I'm sorry, I bumped into you. I didn't do it on purpose. Now, one thing you may want to remember is that not only English is a polite language, as we said before, but also it's a written language. Short, much shorter than Italian, but people love receiving a card. Of course, this is a virtual world. We all send emails, which is fine, but there is nothing that makes anybody more pleasure, brings anybody more pleasure than receiving a card, a written card where you say, I'm sorry, or you just say, thank you for something.
Apologizing. Always offer a sincere apology when your actions have had a negative impact on other people. Even if you do not understand why someone is upset, you must respect their feelings and accept that your actions have caused the problem. It is important to take full responsibility for your actions. Apologies are much more persuasive if you acknowledge that you are at fault. Saying, I'm sorry I was so late, is more specific than just saying, I'm sorry, and recognizes the other person's feelings. Never accompany your apologies with accusations or insinuations, as this will lessen the impact of the apology. If you have committed a real faux pas, a fitting gesture would be to send a handwritten note, but not as a substitute for a verbal apology, as it would come across as cowardice. Genuine apologies should be acknowledged and graciously accepted.
Chivalry is about manners. We could say a lot of things, but I believe it's quite important that first of all we remain ourselves. In terms of manners, particularly as Italians, we are normally rather polite and we actually are very chivalrous towards ladies, women. So I would say don't lose the manners you've learned. Although in our world a man and a woman are equal, everybody's a professional, and therefore sometimes women may get a little bit offended if you are overly attentive to them. On the other hand, in my experience, when you're abroad and you pull the chair for a lady, or you help a lady with her luggage, or you open the door for her, they will always come back with the famous comment, "Oh, you are so Italian, it's such a pleasure." So enjoy and go for it.
Chivalry. In today's society, men are faced with the challenge of adapting traditional gestures to fit in with more modern and relaxed approaches to life. New chivalry is all about natural gestures. There needs to be a balance between treating a woman like a lady and respecting her independence. The act of holding a door open for a woman is still deemed a chivalrous gesture. However, if a woman starts to open a door, a man shouldn't jump in front of her and cry out, "I'll get that!" Both men and women should hold doors open for people coming through behind them.
Dress code. L'abito fa il monaco. It is actually true that depending the type of meeting, the type of people you are going to meet, it's important to decide what type of dress code you want to use. First of all, I'd like to stress the fact that in Italy we are rather elegant, and abroad everybody always comments about the elegance of an Italian person, so I wouldn't worry that much. But in the Anglo-Saxon world, particularly in the USA, there are specific dress codes. For example, having to wear black tie, whether you are in the UK or in the USA, it's rather important, which means when you receive an invitation, remember to read carefully what is the dress code. Quite often you will notice when you receive even an email or an invitation for a cocktail party or even a lunch, it may actually say what the dress code is. If it states, for example, casual smart, it means that a jacket is actually required, but not necessarily a tie for men. Ladies, I would say that a cocktail dress is always welcome. You could wear a suit, but remember that in certain companies, it is quite important that you always wear a dress and not trousers. So again, look carefully at what the dress code of the company is or of the professional field you're in. Now, a little tip for you. You probably remember a few years ago we had this famous Casual Friday that came from the United States. Casual Friday is going a little bit out of fashion, if not quite out of fashion. It was the famous Fridays where everybody was wearing jeans and t-shirts. Now, in today's world, we have meetings on Monday as we have them on Friday. So just remember, A, to be yourself, B, to look at the dress code which is the most appropriate for the type of clients you're dealing with or for the nations you're dealing with. A few more tips in terms of dress code. Maybe the first one is I would be a little careful about wearing sports shoes and trainers. I mean, for a gentleman, a pair of normal shoes, it's always better. Normal shoes meaning leather shoes. The second thing is a shirt for a man. It's easier to wear and you will never go wrong. Obviously, if you have Brad Pitt's body, you might as well wear a t-shirt, but you better make sure that the t-shirt is a branded t-shirt, which sometimes is much more expensive than a normal dress shirt. The last thing is, if you are, for example, in the city of London, or you're going to the financial district in New York, at that point you may have to wear a suit, definitely a tie, and of course there's a color code, and they do not particularly appreciate brown, but it's mostly blue or gray. Nevertheless, when you are in our field and you are an architect, a designer, you can wear different things, because it's also accepted that you may be going to a building site, and in any case, designers, architects are considered somehow artists, and they can wear different things as long as they are clean and they are worn in the nice way.
Dress codes. There are dress codes for a multitude of different occasions. The dress code is usually stated on the invitation for private events such as parties, balls, weddings, etc. Black tie may also be referred to as dinner jackets, dress for dinner, and cravate noire, or as tuxedos in America. A smart dress, such as a cocktail dress, is appropriate for ladies. The length may vary depending on current fashions, but it should never be too short. The little black dress is traditional, but not essential. A smart casual dress code means you should look smart, but not overly formal. For men, a jacket or blazer and flannels or chinos are appropriate, but jeans are not. A shirt and tie may be worn, and an open collar is also acceptable. Women should choose a smart dress or skirt and top coupled with a jacket or smart cover-up. Wear smart shoes, avoiding sportswear and trainers.
Humor in business. I think we said it before. It is important to have a touch, a sense of humor, but the most important thing is to always remain politically correct. Ideally, not to go too much on about religion, politics, or sex, but a nice touch of humor is always appreciated, and it also helps to reposition a meeting or have a moment of relax. So whatever you do, be yourself, but remember not to overdo it in terms of jokes.
Humor. Jokes and humor can be a dangerous area. If you don't understand the customs and traditions of those you are dealing with, you are walking on eggshells. However, in many situations, a joke can ease the tension and help to get the conversation back on track. The British are known for their caustic satire. Whether faced with a train strike, a screaming infant, or a senile parent, a sense of humor is one of life's essential tools. Laughing with colleagues about the boss's peculiarities can make boring jobs tolerable. Gallows humor can make light of even the worst tragedies. At least the house burning down means we've finally got rid of Great Aunt Margaret's China doll collection. This particularly applies if you can maintain a sense of humor about yourself. As someone once said, the person who knows how to laugh at himself will never cease to be amused.
Meetings can be rather long at times, and we need to find a way of breaking them up. Several ways of doing it. One would be to ask for a coffee break or for a comfort break. The other one would be to crack a joke, raccontare una barzelletta. We need to be a little careful. In some of our Southern European countries, jokes, barzellette, can be a little heavy duty, and therefore we need to lighten them up. They need to be short and sweet, as they would say in English. Most importantly, they need to be politically correct, which really means that you should not be talking about politics, you should not be talking about religion, and you should not be talking about sexual issues. I know it doesn't leave much, but it's up to your imagination. Informality, different ways of saying hellos in different countries. In Italy, we have a tendency to use a lot of titles. L'architetto, l'ingegnere, il dottore. Abroad is not necessarily the same thing. For example, in Anglo-Saxon cultures, mainly you would say Mr. and Mrs. so-and-so, so you don't use the actual title, unless it's a very formal occasion where you may want to be introduced as Lord so-and-so or Sir Richard Attenborough, and so on and so forth, because it's a form of recognition of a certain degree that you've actually reached in life. Nevertheless, here we are in English, and therefore Mr. and Mrs. to begin with, it's fine, but then very easily you would go on to first name. So you're talking at Susanna, Aldo, Mario, Antonio, John, Vivienne, and so on and so forth, but it's first name. Just for you to know, in other countries it's a question of professional background. So if we are both architects and I'm going into Spain, it would be you, first name, Mario, Antonio, whatever it is, simply because we come from the same profession. One more time, when you're in the UK, I would maybe, or in the United States, I would maybe suggest that at the beginning, when you meet the person for the first time, you would want to say Mr. or Mrs. so-and-so, but then you will see that very easily the other person will say, oh, please call me John, please call me Susan, and from that point onwards, it will be on a first name basis. France is always different, we know that. Everybody is a monsieur and madame, and they actually like a lot their monsieur and madame. But then when you start dealing with clients in today's world, it'll be on a first name basis, but always with lei, vous, never with tu. There you are.
Informality. The days when men referred to or introduced each other by surname and when office hierarchies required the use of Mr. or Miss are long gone. Informality is in, and the first names are becoming de rigueur. Even in professional situations, when dealing with doctors, lawyers, policemen, and bank managers, informality is increasingly employed. The use or not of first names is still generational. The older you are, the more likely you are to address people as Mr., Mrs., or Miss. The younger you are, the less likely. For many older people, the easy use of the first name is seen over-familiar and verging on offensive. Nevertheless, if you choose to be informal, it is still better to have good manners and call someone by their first name than be discourteous while adhering to correct form and using their surname.
Introduction. How do we introduce ourselves in a formal situation or even in an informal situation? Up to a few years ago, you would say, how do you do? It is definitely very English, I would say very British, but it's not necessarily the form that is used these days. What is mostly used is nice to meet you, it's a pleasure meeting you. And normally you would always say, how are you? So, hello, I'm Aldo. Nice to meet you, how are you? And the other person would also reply, nice meeting you, how are you? The other thing is, in terms of politeness, remember that using a similar form, when you actually say goodbye to the person, you could say things like, lovely meeting you, or it was lovely to have met you, looking forward to meeting you again, looking forward to seeing you again next week, looking forward to visiting your offices, for example. In any case, what's important is that, one more time, you have to be polite. You have to state your name and last name, and if you are in a gathering where you bring your team to the meeting, in that case it will be your responsibility to introduce the members of your team, and therefore you could say, hello, let me introduce you the members of my team, let me introduce you my colleagues, this is John, this is Mary, this is Susan, and hopefully say what sort of responsibility they have in your company. And then you could say, for example, if there is only one person on the other side, you could say, John, to your team, you could say, this is Jonathan, who is the managing director of the company, for example. One little tip: when you introduce someone from your team, or even introducing yourself, if you have enough knowledge of the person, the people that are in front of you, you may want to add something slightly personal. For example, hi, I'm Aldo Zoli, nice meeting you. By the way, I'm Italian, as you know. Or something like, oh, I love canoeing, I understand you love canoeing as well. And same thing, if you're introducing members of your team, you could say, this is Susan, she's responsible for interior design in our office, and by the way, she's a martial art champion.
Introduction. If you are the connection between people who have never met before, you must make the introductions. But there is a hierarchy to remember. Men should be introduced to women, and juniors to elder people and higher ranks. You should introduce individuals to the group first, and then the group to the individual. For example, Susan, this is Jim, Peter and Emma. Everyone, this is Susan. In a formal situation, you must mention surnames. I'd like to introduce you to my dear friend, Mrs. Martin. Allow me to introduce my colleague, Ms. Smith. Let me introduce you to my surveyor, Daniel Rowlands. Mr. Brown, this is Alice Clark from Lolly Incorporated. How do you do? How do you do? It is a pleasure to meet you. The traditional British greeting upon introduction is, how do you do? However strange it may seem, the appropriate response is to repeat the phrase, how do you do? In situations where this exchange may seem too formal, a friendly hello will usually suffice. At an even more informal level, the response to hi, how are you? Or hi, how's things? Should be positive and upbeat. Fine, thanks, and you? Or fine, thanks, can't complain.
Official invitation. Very often in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, you would receive official invitation for an event. The invitation will most probably state the place, the type of function, the dress code, and obviously the time. Now remember, the notion of time is not necessarily the same as we have, which means that if it says 5 p.m., it is 5 p.m. and you're not meant to get there 15 minutes later, because that will be not acceptable. You'll have to be there 10 or 15 minutes before. So time is time. 5 p.m., it's 5 p.m. 8 p.m., it's 8 p.m. And don't be surprised when they will invite you for dinner at 6:30, because that's what happens in many countries, and particularly in the United States, where you have breakfast meetings at 7 a.m. and you have dinner invitations at 5:45 p.m. Have fun!
Official invitations. Invitations to official functions are usually printed on a card. They usually indicate the type of function, the location of the function, the date of the function, the time of the function and, where appropriate, the time it will end. An invitation to an official function should be addressed only to the guest invited. Guests are given their full prefix, title, as for a formal letter. Nowadays, all this can be sent in an email containing the information described and the appropriate graphics. To apologize. Responsibility. Persuasive. To acknowledge. Accusation. Insinuation. Impact. Faux pas. Handwritten note. Chivalry. Challenge. Gesture. Relaxed. Dress code. Invitation. Black tie. Smart casual. Sportswear. Trainers. Dangerous area. Joke. Caustic satire. Colleague. Peculiarity. Hierarchy. De rigueur. Generational. Introduction. Surveyor. Function. Prefix. Title.